first of all, it is a pleasure for me to be here again. It's not the first time I'm addressing a conference organized by SMEA and to visit your lovely city of Lisbon. I come from Malta, a very small economy. However, from what I have heard thus far today, it is very fruitful for an exchange of experiences between different countries on a matter as sensitive as that of information and consultation. To give you a general background of Malta, one could say that the origins of information and consultation go hand in hand with Malta's industrial development and with the evolution of its industrial relations. Therefore, even before there was formal legislation about information and consultation, one could say that there were informal systems of information and consultation, mainly through the interaction between employers and unions. Therefore, you had workplaces which were unionized, covered by a collective agreement, and the presence of a collective agreement in itself allowed for certain systems of information and consultation. Another feature of the Maltese context, I would say, is the stability of industrial relations. And in Malta, stable industrial relations are one of the cornerstones of its ability to attract investment and to generate jobs. In fact, in the private sector, hardly any mandates are lost in any year due to industrial actions. Therefore, it is, I think, something that in itself as well establishes a fertile ground on which to establish systems of information and consultation. Naturally, with Malta's accession into the European Union, we had to transpose Directive 2002-14, that is, which is related to information and consultation, to the Maltese legislation. And in fact, we have legal notices that cover information and consultation. Define consultation as an exchange of views and establishment of dialogue between employee representatives and employers, with specifics in our legislation in the interest of both employers and the undertaking. Therefore, information and consultation is there to the benefit of both the undertaking and employers. So, dealing with recent and probable development of the undertaking's activities and economic situation, when there is a threat to the undertaking, for example, with respect to layoffs and even an increase in employment, substantial changes in work organization, and the legislation also specifies the timing of information consultation, the method to be used, and the content, that is the content which is to be contained in any communication which is related to information and consultation. It enables the representatives to meet the employer at the relevant level of management to obtain a reasonable response. Information and consultation can take place with union representatives in the case of unionized companies. However, in Malta, although there is a wide coverage of trade unionization, in fact, about 55% of our labor force is reported to be unionized, and therefore one could assume that at least 55% or more are covered by collective agreements. However, in companies which are not unionized, then you have the appointment of employee representatives for a 3-year appointment. Our legislation also establishes the number of meetings with employee representatives. So there has to be at least one meeting every 6 months, which is to be held with the company's representative, and this applies for companies that employ more than 50 employees, same as the EU directive, I believe. issues of consultation, issues of whether there should be consultations can be taken up in front of the Maltese Industrial Tribunal. Therefore, the Industrial Tribunal has the power to decide whether an issue falls under the remit of information and consultation or not, and to decide whether or which information could be harmful or prejudicial to the enterprise. So the Industrial Tribunal can decide on the information or the document which is to be disclosed by the employee representative, the recipients of the information, that is, who is to receive that information, the terms on which the information is to be disclosed, and even to establish a date by which such information is to be provided. There are other pieces of legislation that tie into this as well. Therefore, besides the legal notice on information and consultation, we have other related legislation related to collective redundancies and transfer of business. And in these legal notices, there is also reference to the duty of employers to consult either the unions, of course, or else the employee representatives about any changes that are going to affect the employees. So, for example, the employee has to be notified in writing. The consultation with the employee has to start within 7 days of the notice in writing. The reasons for the redundancy are to be given, and there should be discussions whether the redundancies can be mitigated, reduced, or turned into other forms of measures to improve efficiency. And also the transfer of business contains significant clauses which are related to information and consultation. Besides, so far I have focused mostly on the info and consultation at enterprise level. However, in Malta, as in other countries, of course, there is also a system of social dialogue which tackles information and consultation at national level. And the key instrument for this is the Malta Council for Economic and Social Development, which is a tripartite forum with representatives, that is, from employers, unions, government, and also recently civil society. And we use this forum as a means for government to consult us and inform us about issues of economic and social development, and for example about economic strategy. And this forum has been instrumental in Malta to tackle issues, for example, related to economic restructuring. Over the past 10 years, Malta has lost thousands of jobs in the manufacturing industry, particularly in the low value-added manufacturing industry, but it has generated a corresponding amount and more in newly emerging industries, such as services industries, financial services, IT, gaming, aircraft maintenance, and others. And I think part of the successes that we've had in this economic transformation has been the strength of our social dialogue structures. And recently, our information and consultation structures through social dialogue have also been tested during the economic recession. Malta was, I think, was one of the countries which did not experience great fluctuations in economic activity during the recession. And I believe that part of this happened because there was constant dialogue between employers and unions, both at enterprise level and at national level, which enabled us to find, first of all, customized solutions to companies that were facing problems. So, for example, turning redundancies into shorter working weeks, using idle hours to provide training and other measures. And at national level to see how the country could generate sufficient employment to compensate to those that were being lost. The result of this was that although unemployment increased slightly during the recession, but it did not reach alarming proportion. A more recent test has been during the crisis in Libya. A number of Maltese companies operate in Libya. Thousands of Maltese workers actually work in Libya, and when there was the crisis, these jobs were in peril, and therefore both the legislation of information and consultation and also the social dialogue structures had to act to try to reduce as possible the negative impact of these developments. And here I emphasize that although it is important to have legal structures, although it is important to have legislation to regulate and to guarantee certain standards of information and consultation, but ultimately I would say that it also depends on company and country's culture, because it is something that one does not resort to only when there is a need to apply the law, but it is something which needs to be ongoing. And I think even when you have successful enterprises, the stronger the links of communication, not just when there is the threat of unemployment, not just when there is the possibility of a merger or a takeover. So not only when something dramatic happens, but when you have the systems in place. For example, the knowing who the employee representative is, keeping constant contact with the employee representatives would help to reduce friction when a crisis comes over the horizon. We have other structures besides the MEASD, for example, the Employment Relations Board, which discusses also with the social partners any changes in employment legislation. In fact, I remember even when the Information Consultation Legal Notice was coming into force, the Employment and Relations Board discussed and drafted the legislation with the involvement of unions, with the involvement of employer bodies as well. Besides that, there is also the wage regulation orders, which are sectoral, sectoral legislation that regulates the conditions of employment in different areas of the economy. In Malta, we have about 35 different wage regulation orders, also with provisions for, in some respects, for information and consultation. I think there were various instances where the process of informing and consulting employees was important in Malta, but at times the success depends on the information being handled responsibly. So I think it is important for employee representatives to be trained on what their rights are as employee representatives, and also on how and in what manner to divulge any information to the company employees. Because at times, as you know, some information could be harmful to the employees themselves, could be harmful to their jobs. I remember a particular exercise, and I would like to close on this point. When the Maltese shipyards were going to be privatized, a mediation effort was set up between the government and the unions, because there was strong conflict between government and the General Workers' Union at the time, and there was a general concern that this conflict would spill over in the private sector as well, because it was a national hot issue. And we, as an employers' organization, were called in to mediate, which may seem strange, but we were called as mediators. And I remember telling both government and worker representatives that I will only mediate insofar as nothing leaks to the media, not even my identity. the identity of the mediator. And it was quite a challenge, of course, for the information not to leak out, but the mediation efforts carried on for 3 whole weeks, 3 weeks without anything leaking out to the press, with media persons calling here and there to gather some piece of information, but the information was only made public once an agreement had been approved by IOAs, agreed by government, and then we went to the media. And I'm saying this because today, with social media, with the media, at times, information can be misinterpreted and information can do a lot of harm. So, and I will end with this comment, information at the end of the day has to be managed. Thank you.